definitely not the best money can buy. We'll give it all she's got. Boy, that would make one heck of an alarm clock. I think I'm gonna put a pair of safety glasses on because I think I'm gonna shatter this tool. It's gotta be done. It's gotta give it up now. Steering gearbox out. 32mm socket. And a breaker bar on here. And a pipe. Let's see if we can break this thing loose pretty easy. I got this thing broke loose. It took about everything I had and pretty much flexing my breaker bar and my pipe to get that bolt broke loose. Pull the Pitman arm. Again, this isn't a Pitman arm puller, but it's a puller nonetheless, so let's see what happens. Make sure I'm not screwing up any of the threads in the back there. Alright, round two as far as pulling the Pitman arm. I went up to the store and bought a Pitman arm removal tool. However, this is definitely not the best money can buy. This is probably the cheapest tool money can buy. I don't even know if money bought this tool that's so cheap. So we'll see what happens. Not sure who's gonna win, the Pitman arm or the tool. I got a lot of pull on there. So that's a no. Alright, I think I'm going to put a pair of safety glasses on because I think I'm going to shatter this tool in a second. Here we go again. Throw the impact back on here and give it all she's got. Boy, that would make one heck of an alarm clock. Yeah, that just does not want to give it up. I'm going to throw some light heat on it. I'm just going to take a propane torch and heat this thing up. Typically, I wouldn't, if I was going to reuse this box, I wouldn't do it because I don't want to mess anything up. Alright, I know a propane torch isn't going to get it that hot, but let's see what happens. Oh, nothing. I've tried pretty much everything I could with this tool. That's still a little hot right now. So I'm left with no choice, and I hate to do this, but I'm just going to split the Pitman arm. I'm going to go in and cut off wheel, put a slice in it, and take it off that way. I hate doing that because I'm going to waste a perfectly good Pitman arm and I'm going to have to buy another one. And I don't know about you guys, but man, I hate spending extra money on projects like this. It really drives me absolutely freaking crazy. But yeah, sometimes if I'm just going to screw around and waste more and more time on this, it's got to be done. So here we go. In the Pitman arm, but before I go and break this off now, what I'm gonna do is it'll just be easier. I'm gonna pull this ball joint or tie rod end out, 19mm, pop out no problem at all. I'll just loosen this up a little bit. I'm not gonna get it very loose until I break the Pitman arm off of it. Yeah, there we go. That's off now. I hit that harder than I really wanted to because I really didn't want to mess this thing up. It's just a matter of time. Is it still holding on? Back to the cutoff wheel. I'm pretty much through that entire thing. It's got to give it up now. Yep, I think that was it. Looking at the top side of the steering gearbox, and we got to disconnect three things from here. We got the two power steering lines that come in. This one to the right, very easy to get at, no problem. They're both 18mm. You do want to use a line wrench to do it, or a flared wrench, whatever. I call them line wrenches. This one's very easy at, no problem. The one to the left is difficult to get at it because of the stabilizer link bar right here is in the way. So either you can take these two bolts out and move this. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is come around here. I've got a jack underneath here, and what I'm going to do is take out two of the three bolts, these 16mm bolts that hold it in, and then I'm just going to rotate it on my floor jack a little. All right, so I'm going to take these two completely out. I'm going to loosen this one so I can rotate about it. A 16mm socket. My jack underneath here because this thing is super heavy. I got this bolt still in. You can see everything's kind of moving around. So I'm going to leave that guy in. I'm taking this one out. I've got the bottom one out. And what I'm going to do, get that done, I want to rotate this up. So I'll take top side here. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so I want to rotate this up so I can get at that nut for the power steering pretty easy. Now you can see that I exposed that nut pretty good. Now I'm able to get that out. 18 millimeter line wrench. A lot of line wrench sets don't have an 18 millimeter, so if you got a basic set, it's probably not going to have an 18. So you might have to, do some looking. One on the far right hand side is no big deal. This one just pops right out of here. That's not a problem. The one on the left hand side, I haven't been able to break this guy loose, so I'm going to drop him down. I tried to do it up here. I did lift this up a little bit so I can get a better shot at it, but this thing was already rounded out a little bit before I started, and even with my line wrench, I'm starting to round the top of that nut off. So I want to try to get a better bite at it down lower, but we'll see. I might be replacing that line too. I don't want to, but the way this project's been going, I wouldn't be surprised. So I'll take the other bolt out. I got it sitting on my jack, and I'll lower this thing down. The steering arm comes down, meets up with the steering box. There's a 13 millimeter bolt that links these together. I'll get this guy out of here. All right, there's a 13 millimeter bolt out. All right, in an effort to make this easier, I'm just gonna pop off the two power steering lines off the pump. So this one thinks a 16 millimeter. We got the return line down at the bottom here. There's just a band clamp. Let me get you down a little deeper here so you can see. Bottom there where that band clamp is, I'm just gonna break the band clamp, which I already have. And I'll just slip that hose off. That's the return line. And the top one's the high pressure line up here. So I'll get rid of both those. That'll give me plenty of slack that I can drop the power steering gearbox down. That's going to be heavy, and it's probably going to fall to the floor, and I don't want it to rip these lines out. Pull that lower return line off. I got a little rubber plug so I don't leak up all over the ground. Pop that off and throw this rubber plug on there. That'll keep the power steering from leaking all over the place. I won't make a giant mess, which is kind of cool. And the power steering gearbox out. So this nut is completely rounded off. It looked like somebody before me had rounded off, and I didn't do it any justice either when I was trying to get it out. So the return lines are fairly inexpensive and cheap. I'm just going to go in with a cutoff wheel and cut this off. The other thing too is when somebody tightened this up, they bound it so tight against the high pressure line. I can't get the high pressure line out of there. So I'm done with it. I'm just cutting it off. All right, I'll just replace this. That guy's out of there. That's it. All right, we got the new power steering box. Actually, the cost of the power steering box wasn't bad. It was $184 plus tax. The core charge was expensive though, $130 core charge, but at least to get that money back. But anyway, I did have to buy a return line, which was a pretty nice return line. It was a precision return line. It was 33 bucks-ish. So that wasn't too bad. Comes with a new O-ring. So we got the new one prepped and ready to go. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pop both of these out. What I did before I put it on is the old line, I did clean up the inside of this really good. There's a lot of rust and stuff built up in there. Cleaned up the O-ring really good to make sure the seal's up right. So this will go, the high pressure line is gonna go on the furthest, or the one closest to the frame. So what I'll do is I'll just get this in by as far as I can go in by hand. That way I can move it around and position inside the vehicle, and I know that I'm threaded in and not cross-threaded. High pressure line is going to come around this way, and then the return line is going to come around this way. The way these work is this will come around this way. It'll be something like this when it goes into the vehicle. So it's going to look like that when it goes in. All right, the next thing is I did clean up the bolts that hold the steering gear box on. Before I slide this back together again, inside the steering shaft, what I'm gonna do is spray a little blaster in there. I got a battery terminal cleaner. I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna jam it up in there, and yeah. All right, I got the steering gearbox prepped and ready to go back up. You can see how I got the lines routed. I've got the high pressure line routed around this side, comes down underneath. Then I've got the return line routed over the top of it. And how this works is the high pressure one's gonna wrap down the side of it, and then the low pressure one is actually going to sit right against this rubber piece here. So I'll get this thing slid up and get that steering arm aligned. And I did put it on a jack. I was gonna lift it up, but I'm feeling wimpier now. So I'm gonna raise this up as close as I can with my jack. All right, the hardest part of this process is going to be tipping this guy up, because it is a heavy dude. I try to get you guys in here up close and personal as you can. Now you can see where it's got the flat right there. The flat on the top of the gearbox is right there. So I'm gonna rotate this guy around 90 degrees, get the flat on top, and hopefully this should just slip right in there. All right, as I work it in there, I have to get this thing seated a lot closer before I can get these bolts to line up. So, got the gearbox up and the 3 bolts started. What I had to do to get the gearbox positioned in the right spot, I did have to move the low pressure line. I had to take that off and get it out of the way. I couldn't do it with a low pressure line on. So I just had the high pressure line on, and now I'm gonna feed the low pressure line. Before I get this tightened up, while I can move it around, I'll get the low pressure line started and tighten it up after that. All right, to get this 13mm bolt started, what you gotta do is rotate the steering wheel 90 degrees to the right, and that'll get the whole location straight down so you can get the 13mm bolt started. Next up, we're just gonna torque the 13mm coupler bolt. That's torque specs to 36 foot-pounds or 49 Newton meters. There we go. All right, 16mm bolts that go through the frame into the power steering box or the gearbox. These are going to be torqued to 70 foot-pounds or 95 Newton meters. There we go. So before we put the Pitman arm, we want to make sure that the front wheels are as straight as possible before we line that up. We want to go back into the Jeep and re-straighten the wheel. Remember, we turned this 180 degrees so we could tighten down that coupler bolt. So we got this guy as centered as I could possibly make it. All right, I'll line the Pitman arm up. The way this works, there's some wider grooves, so it should only go on one way. All right, put the lock washer on there. And I've got the nut inside my socket right now. We're snugging this guy up. I'm not gonna over torque this yet. I'm gonna put the drag link bar on here first before I torque this. But this is gonna get torqued to Pitman arm 185 foot-pounds or 251 Newton meters. Whoa. All right, that's as far as I'm going right now. All right, first position, I got the steering wheel straight, but you can see the Pitman arm and the drag link are about 2 inches off. So, all right, Susan, if you could turn the wheel to the right. Go to the left. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, going. Right there. Turn it in that same direction a little bit more. Stop right there. Now, all right, as Susan moved the steering wheel until I got the Pitman arm to meet up with the drag link, I'll push that up there. I know the steering wheel is off a mile, 19mm nut. I'll slide that guy up there. And thread it on. Push that up higher. Project's a problem. Every single thing. All right, here we go. All right, we're gonna torque this to 55 foot-pounds or 74 Newton meters. There we go. All right, and then the trick is the cotter pin doesn't line up. We're going to give that a small turn, but it looks like the cotter pin's going to line up perfect with our spec. Inside the Jeep, the steering wheel is about 90 degrees off, a half turn off. So we'll get back underneath the Jeep, make an adjustment. All right, so I just loosened up the two 15mm bolts that tighten down this clamp on the drag link. Fortunately, I just had the ends of this drag link just replaced, so this clamp is brand new. So it'll make the adjustment super easy. So actually, I can just turn this by hand. I have my wife inside the vehicle watching the steering wheel. All right, looks centered. Yeah. All right, so I had to turn those quite a bit. I'm going to turn this back for a minute because I want to take a look. So you can see we got plenty of engagement. We're actually getting closer than further away, so that's pretty good. I'd rather have the most thread engagement that we can have. All right, so let me know where is that centered? Okay, there we go. I'll tighten up these two 15mm bolts and we are ready to go for a drive.